Hold up your hand for a moment and notice how solid it feels. Warm, certain, full of substance, the most real thing in your world. Now here is what no one ever told you. Your hand is more than 99.9999% empty space, and so is everything you have ever touched. The same emptiness fills the universe at every scale, from the inside of a single atom to the enormous voids between the galaxies, voids hundreds of millions of light years wide, with almost nothing in them at all. You have never truly touched anything. You have never seen the night sky as it is, only its ancient light. And everything you can see is a speck in a cosmos that may never end. Solidity was only ever the first illusion. Make yourself comfortable. Subscribe to the Sleepy Solstice if you haven't yet, because by the end of this, you will feel the size of the universe not as something out there, but as something you are quietly made of. Now, let's gently fall into this. Part 1. The peace you think you've made. You already know how big the universe is, or at least you think you do. You have heard the number more times than you can count, in classrooms and documentaries and late-night videos very much like this one. The observable universe is about 93 billion light-years across. It holds something like 2 trillion galaxies. It contains, by one famous estimate, around 10 to the 80th atoms, a figure so large that writing it out would mean a 1 followed by 80 zeros. You have heard these numbers, and somewhere along the way, you made your peace with them. That peace is a quiet thing, and most people never notice they made it. It usually happens the first time you are very young, and someone tells you that the stars are not little lights stuck to a dome, but enormous suns impossibly far away. There is a moment of vertigo, a small lurch in the stomach, and then the mind does what the mind always does with something too large to hold. It rounds the feeling off. It files the whole subject under a single soft word. Big. The universe is big. And once that word is in place, you can look up at the night sky for the rest of your life and feel almost nothing, because the word is already doing your feeling for you. Tonight, I want to take that word away from you. Not to frighten you, and not to make you feel small in the cruel sense, the way a bad teacher might. I want to take it away because it is hiding something, and what it is hiding is far stranger and far more beautiful than the comfortable number you have been carrying around. The truth is that the scale of the universe is not one fact. It is a stack of facts, and each one sits underneath the last like a trapdoor under a floor you thought was solid. And every time you think you have finally understood how large all of this is, the floor opens again, and you fall a little further. Think for a moment about how that number actually reaches you. 93 billion light years, and why it lands so softly. You hear it in a calm voice, over gentle music, written in clean white letters on a dark screen. It arrives already tamed, already packaged, a fact to be admired rather than felt. And there is a reason it cannot land harder, which is that your mind has no machinery for it. You can picture a distance of a few meters perfectly. You can picture a kilometer, the length of a walk you have taken. You can stretch, with effort, to picture the distance across a country, because you have perhaps travelled it. But a light year, the distance light travels in a year at 300,000 kilometers every second, is already past the edge of what you can hold. And the number we are discussing is 93 billion of them. The figure does not overwhelm you, only because it cannot reach you. It is too large to trigger the feeling it ought to trigger, and so it slides in quietly and lies down next to all the other facts you have politely accepted and never examined. That is exactly the comfort I want to disturb, and I want to be clear about my method, because I am not going to do it with bigger numbers. Bigger numbers would not help. You cannot be frightened by a figure you cannot feel. Instead, I am going to do it by changing what the number is about. We will not make the universe larger tonight. We will look, again and again, at what that largeness actually consists of. And each time we look more closely, the comfortable picture will fail in a new way. The size will stay the same. Your understanding of what the size means is what is going to keep falling. I should be honest with you about where we are going, because the honesty is part of the point. We are not going to end this in a place of comfort. We are not going to arrive at some tidy reassurance that everything is fine and the universe is cozy after all. What we are going to do instead is something slower and, I think, better. We are going to walk down through the layers of what scale actually means, one trapdoor at a time, until the word big falls away entirely, and what is left behind is a feeling that does not have a single easy name. It is closer to recognition than to fear. By the time we reach the bottom, I think you will look at your own hand differently, and I think you will look at the night sky differently, and I do not think the word big will ever quite work for you again. So let us start with the comfortable picture, the one you already hold, so that we know exactly what we are taking apart. When you imagine the universe, you probably imagine something full. You picture a great darkness crowded with stars, galaxies wheeling everywhere you look, light pouring in from every direction. You picture a place that is, above all, packed. There is so much of it, your imagination says, that it must be brimming with things. The number is so enormous that it feels like abundance. 2 trillion galaxies. Surely that is a universe overflowing. It is worth pausing on how recently we even acquired that comfortable number, because the comfort is much younger than it feels. For almost the entire history of our species, the sky was small. It was a dome, a ceiling, a painted lid over a flat and central earth, and the lights upon it were close enough to touch in the imagination. Every culture that ever looked up built that ceiling differently, but they all built a ceiling. The idea that the stars might be other suns, unthinkably far, is only a few centuries old, and the idea that they gather into galaxies, and that our galaxy is one among countless others, is younger than the oldest person's great-grandparents. As recently as 100 years ago, many serious astronomers believed the Milky Way was the entire universe, that beyond it there was simply nothing. Every single time we have measured the sky more carefully, the answer has come back the same. It is larger than you thought. It was larger than that too. Keep going. So the number you carry, the 93 billion light-years, is not an ancient inheritance. It is the latest result in a long series of humblings, each one of which felt at the time like the final word. And if history is any guide, the most dangerous thing you can do with such a number is to feel that you have understood it. The people who believed the Milky Way was everything were not foolish. They were reasoning carefully from the best evidence they had, and they were wrong by a factor beyond their imagining. We should hold our own certainty a little more loosely than they held theirs, because the one thing the universe has taught us, over and over, is that our sense of how big it is has always been too small. Hold on to that picture for a moment, because it is wrong in almost every way that matters, and the manner in which it is wrong is the first trapdoor. The number 93 billion light-years is real, and it is correct, and it is also the single most misleading thing in this entire subject. It describes the size of a container. It says nothing whatsoever about how much is inside. And as we are about to see, the answer to that question is the first thing that should unsettle you, because the container is not brimming. The container is almost perfectly empty. There is one more thing I want to name before we begin to descend, because we are going to return to it at the very end, and I want you to feel how its meaning changes along the way. It is this peace you think you have made, the comfort you feel when you hear the number and nod. I am not going to leave you without any peace at all, but the peace you have now is the peace of someone who has stopped asking questions, the peace of a word standing in for an experience. By the end of tonight, I hope to hand you back a different kind of peace entirely, one that does not come from looking away. So keep that phrase somewhere in the back of your mind as we go. The peace you think you have made. We will come back for it. For now, settle in, and let me show you the first thing the number was hiding, because the universe is not big in the way you think. It is something much worse and much stranger, and we are only just beginning. Part 2. Big was the gentlest word. Let me give you a number that does not appear on the posters. The average density of ordinary matter in the universe, when you spread everything out evenly, comes to roughly 1 hydrogen atom for every few cubic meters of space. Sit with that for a second, because it is almost impossible to believe. Take a volume of the universe the size of a small room, scoop it up from some random location far from any galaxy, and on average you would find inside it a small handful of atoms, sometimes fewer. In fact, by some estimates, if you marked out a single random cubic meter of the cosmos and looked inside, there is a better than even chance you would find nothing in it at all, not a thin gas, not a faint dust, nothing. This is the first trapdoor, and it is a large one. The universe is not full. The universe is, to a degree that human intuition simply cannot accommodate, empty. When you pictured that crowded sky a moment ago, that abundance, that overflowing darkness packed with stars, you were picturing the rarest possible thing. You were imagining the exception and mistaking it for the rule. The rule is emptiness. The matter, all of it, every star and planet and cloud of gas, is a faint contamination scattered through an overwhelming amount of nothing. To understand how the matter is arranged, you have to let go of the idea of a sky and start thinking about a structure. Over the last several decades, astronomers have mapped the positions of millions of galaxies, and what they found was not a random sprinkle. The galaxies are strung along threads. Imagine an enormous web, or the foam on top of the sea, or the inside of a sponge, or, if you have ever seen it, a thin slice of brain tissue under a microscope with its tangle of connecting fibers. The matter of the universe clings to long filaments and broad sheets, and these filaments cross and knot together at points where the galaxies cluster most thickly. Cosmologists call this the cosmic web, and it is one of the most beautiful images modern science has ever produced. But here is what the beautiful image is really telling you. Between the threads of the web, there are bubbles. Enormous, dark, nearly empty bubbles, and they are called voids. A typical void is something like 100 to 500 million light-years across, a region so large that light itself, the fastest thing there is, would need hundreds of millions of years simply to cross from one side to the other. And inside, there is almost nothing. The density inside a void can be as low as 10% of the already absurdly thin cosmic average. These are the most perfect empty spaces that exist anywhere. Now here is the part that should make the floor tilt. When you add it all up, these voids do not occupy a little corner of the universe. They occupy most of it. By careful measurement, the voids make up somewhere between 78 and 80% of the entire volume of the universe, while containing only around 14 to 20% of its matter. The filaments, the threads where the galaxies live, hold more than half of all the mass squeezed into only about 4% of the volume. Think about what that means. 4% of space holds half of everything. 80% of space holds almost nothing. The universe is mostly bubbles of darkness, with the occasional bright thread drawn through them like a crack of light under a door. Let me try to give you a feeling for just how thin this matter is, because the number, 1 atom per few cubic meters, slides past too easily. The best vacuum that human beings have ever created in a laboratory, the emptiest chamber we can build with our finest pumps, is crowded compared to the average of intergalactic space. The air in the room around you contains something like 10,000 billion molecules in every cubic meter. The space between the galaxies contains, on average, less than one atom in that same volume. If you wanted to gather a single breath of air, an ordinary lungful, out of the average material of the universe, you would need to sweep clean a volume of space larger than the Earth. The emptiness is not like the emptiness of a quiet room. It is emptier than anything you have ever experienced or could build, by a margin so large it stops being a difference of degree and becomes a difference of kind. And the voids are not small exceptions, tucked between crowded regions. Picture trying to travel across one. Light, moving at 300,000 kilometers every second, the fastest thing that exists, would take hundreds of millions of years simply to cross from one side of a single typical void to the other. For all of that immense crossing, there would be essentially nothing around you. No star to pass, no world. Perhaps, if you were lucky, a single lonely galaxy drifting somewhere in the middle of all that dark. A faint island in an ocean with no other shore in sight. That is the typical condition of the universe. Not the crowded sky, the empty crossing. The crowded sky is the rare and precious exception, and we happen to live inside one of the exceptions, which is exactly why we find it so hard to believe the rule. So when someone tells you the universe is 93 billion light-years across, they are telling you the size of the emptiness. They are not telling you about a crowded place. They are telling you about an almost perfect vacuum, decorated here and there, very sparingly, with the thin filaments where matter managed to gather. The bigness was never the disturbing part. The bigness, on its own, you could live with. It is what the bigness is made of that begins to get under the skin. It is made, overwhelmingly, of nothing. Let yourself drift in one of those voids for a moment, slowly, the way you might float on still water. There is no up and no down here, only the soft black in every direction, and it is not the black of a dark room, which is full of walls and air and the nearness of things. It is a darkness with almost nothing in it for hundreds of millions of light years. If you turned your head, you would see no stars near enough to be more than the faintest pinpricks, and most of the sky would simply be empty, a smooth, unbroken darkness with no features at all. You could travel in a straight line for a length of time longer than the age of the Earth, and pass nothing, touch nothing, arrive nowhere. The silence of it is not frightening once you settle into it. It is enormous and patient and old, the original condition of almost all of space, the quiet that the bright places are the exception to. Most of the universe has always been exactly this still, exactly this empty, exactly this calm. The light and the noise and the crowding that we think of as normal is a rare local accident on a few thin threads, and everywhere else, this gentle, endless dark is simply how things are. And I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to make this sound bleak, and that is not what I am after. There is something almost unbearably elegant about it. The matter did not scatter randomly. Gravity, working patiently over 13.8 billion years, pulled the thin original soup of the early universe into threads and knots, draining the great bubbles empty and feeding the filaments where everything we know now lives. The emptiness is not a failure of the universe to fill itself. The emptiness is the shape that gravity carved. It is the negative space of a slow, enormous sculpture, and we and everything we love are living on the thin, carved edges of it. And here is a further turn of the knife, because the emptiness is even more thorough than the picture I have just drawn. Everything we have been calling matter, all the stars and planets and gas and dust, all the glowing threads of the cosmic web, the ordinary stuff that you and I and everything we can see are made of, adds up to only about 5% of the total contents of the universe. The rest, the overwhelming rest, is two things we can barely describe. About a quarter of it is dark matter, some kind of substance that has mass and pulls with gravity but does not shine, does not interact with light at all, and passes through ordinary matter as if it were not there. And nearly all of the remainder, around 70% of everything, is dark energy, a property of empty space itself that is driving the expansion we have been discussing, and which we understand so poorly that naming it is mostly a way of marking our ignorance. So the matter that builds worlds and stars and bodies, the only kind we have ever touched or seen, is not even the main ingredient. It is a faint 5% garnish on a universe made mostly of things that are invisible, intangible, and barely understood. The emptiness is not only spatial, even where there is something, it is mostly something we cannot see or grasp. But notice what has already happened to the comfortable number. A moment ago, 2 trillion galaxies felt like abundance. Now you know they are scattered across threads that wind through bubbles of near-perfect nothing, and that most of the universe, by far, is the nothing and not the threads. The word big has started to come apart in your hands. The first thing it was hiding was that the universe is, almost entirely, empty. And if that were the only trapdoor, it would be enough to keep you up at night. But it is not the only one. Because the emptiness, as we are about to see, does not stop out there among the voids. It does not stop at the edge of the galaxies, or the edge of the solar system, or the edge of your own skin. The emptiness comes all the way down. It comes for you. Part 3. The emptiness is inside you. Hold up your hand in front of you. Really do it, if you can. Look at the back of your hand, the skin, the small ridges, the solidity of it. It feels like one of the most solid, certain things in your entire experience. It is warm. It is yours. It stops light. If you press it against the surface in front of you, it does not pass through. Everything about it tells you that it is full, that it is made of stuff, packed tight, and almost none of that is true. Your hand is made of cells, and the cells are made of molecules, and the molecules are made of atoms, and the atom, the thing we were taught to think of as the basic building block of solid matter, is itself almost entirely empty space. Not a little empty, overwhelmingly empty. An atom is something like 99.9999% nothing. Nearly all of its mass, more than 99.9% of it, is crammed into the nucleus at the center, and that nucleus is unimaginably tiny compared to the atom as a whole. It takes up roughly 1/10,000th of the atom's width. There is a picture physicists use to make this real, and I want you to build it in your mind slowly. Imagine taking a single atom and blowing it up, swelling it larger and larger, until it is the size of an enormous sports stadium, the kind that holds tens of thousands of people. The whole stadium, the stands, the field, the air above it, all of that is the atom. Now, where is the nucleus, the part that holds essentially all the mass, the dense core of the thing? It is a single marble, sitting on the center spot of the field. One marble in an entire stadium. And everything else, all that volume rising up into the empty air above the seats, is not matter at all. It is the region where the electrons are, and the electrons themselves are smaller than specks. Between the marble at the center and the faint electron haze far out at the edges, there is nothing whatsoever. Let me make it even more vivid with a single atom of hydrogen, the simplest there is. Shrink it in your mind so that its nucleus, its single proton, is the size of a marble you could hold between 2 fingers. On that scale, where is the electron? The electron's cloud is roughly a kilometer away, a full kilometer. Picture a marble sitting on the ground, and then picture the nearest piece of that atom being a faint shimmer most of a mile off in every direction, and in the entire space between, the whole sphere, a kilometer across, there is not one single thing. That is one atom. That is the building block. That is what you are made of. And there is a second number hiding in your own body that belongs in this story, because it shows how the emptiness and the largeness live inside you at the same time. You are made of an almost unthinkable number of these mostly empty atoms, something on the order of 7,000 trillion of them, a 7 followed by 27 zeros. That is a number close to the count of stars, in a sizable fraction of the observable universe. You carry, in the small space of your body, a population of atoms that begins to rival the population of stars in the cosmos, and every single one of those atoms is a marble lost in its own empty stadium. So you are not simply small and solid against a large and empty universe. You are yourself a kind of universe, almost entirely empty, built of an astronomical number of tiny pieces, each one mostly hollow, all of them held in their places by force across gaps of nothing. The scale does not only surround you, it is folded up inside you, the very large and the very empty both, packed into the warm shape sitting in your chair. Now do the arithmetic on yourself. If the atom is that empty, and you are made of atoms, then you are that empty too. By the standard calculation, something like 99.9999999% of you is empty space. If you could somehow remove all the emptiness from the atoms of your body, collapse every electron cloud down onto its marble of a nucleus, what remained of you, your entire body, all of it, would be smaller than a grain of dust, smaller than a speck you could lose on your fingertip. Everything that makes you feel solid, the weight of you in your chair, the firmness of your own hand, is not fullness at all. So why does your hand not pass through the table? Why does anything feel solid if it is almost entirely nothing? The answer is one of the quiet revelations of physics, and it is this. Solidity is not a fact about how full something is. Solidity is a force. When you press your hand against a surface, the electron clouds of your atoms come close to the electron clouds of the table's atoms, and because like charges push against like charges, they resist. They repel one another with enough force to hold the weight of your body, to stop your hand, to make the world feel firm. What you experience as touching a solid object is not two full things meeting. It is two nearly empty things, two clouds of force, refusing to overlap. You have never actually touched anything in your life, not in the way you imagine. You have felt the push of emptiness against emptiness. We did not always know this, and the way we found out is worth telling, because it was one of the great surprises in the history of science. A little over 100 years ago, a physicist named Ernest Rutherford and his collaborators set out to probe the inside of the atom. The accepted picture at the time imagined the atom as a kind of uniform, gentle pudding of matter, charge spread smoothly throughout. To test it, they fired tiny, fast, positively charged particles at an extremely thin sheet of gold foil, expecting them all to sail more or less straight through the soft pudding with only the slightest deflection. Most of them did pass straight through, which already told them the atom was mostly empty. But every so often, one of the particles came bouncing almost straight back, as if it had struck something incredibly small and incredibly dense. Rutherford famously said it was as astonishing as if you had fired an artillery shell at a sheet of tissue paper and watched it rebound and hit you. That rare hard rebound was the discovery of the nucleus, the marble at the center of the empty stadium. The matter you think of as solid was revealed in that experiment to be almost entirely vacancy, with all its substance hiding in a speck at the core. Think about what that means for the experience of being a physical creature in a physical world. When you lie down at the end of the day and feel the solid support of the bed beneath you holding up your weight, no part of you is actually resting on anything substantial. The atoms of your body are hovering above the atoms of the bed, held apart by the repulsion of their electron clouds, two clusters of near-total emptiness refusing to merge. The solidity that is felt your entire life, like the most basic and reliable fact of the physical world, is a sensation manufactured by force fields across gaps of nothing. You float, always, a tiny fraction above everything you ever lie on, lean against, or hold. Nothing solid has ever truly met anything solid, because there is almost no solidity anywhere to meet. Close your eyes for a moment and come with me into the back of your own hand. We are shrinking now, smaller and smaller. The skin opens around us into a plane of cells, each one a soft, enormous chamber. We keep falling. A single cell swells until it fills the sky, and then we drop past its walls into the tangle of molecules within, long chains turning slowly in the dark. We choose one atom and we fall toward it, and as we do, it begins to grow. It grows until it is the size of a cathedral, then a stadium, then larger still, until its edges are lost beyond seeing. And now we are inside it, drifting in an enormous silent emptiness, and far, far below us there is a single point of light, a marble, the nucleus, holding almost everything this atom is. We hang here in the immense hollow space of a single atom inside your own hand, and there is no sound, and there is no matter, only the faint, distant shimmer of an electron somewhere out past the horizon. This silence, this enormous hollow, is not out in distant space. It is under your skin. It has been there your whole life. You are carrying it everywhere you go. It is worth dwelling on how counterintuitive this truly is, because every instinct you have rebels against it. When you knock on a wooden table, you hear a solid sound and feel a solid resistance, and your whole nervous system reports back the same verdict. This is real, this is full, this is here. And yet that table, like the knuckle that raps against it, is overwhelmingly empty, a thin scaffolding of nuclei held in place across enormous gaps by electrical forces. The reason the illusion is so total is that your senses were never built to report the truth about matter. They were built to keep an animal alive, to tell it what it can lean on, and what it can eat, and what might harm it, and for those purposes, the emptiness is irrelevant. The forces are what matter. So evolution gave you a sense of solidity that tracks the forces, not the fullness, and you have spent your entire life inside that useful illusion, mistaking the push of fields for the presence of stuff. The emptiness was always there, under every solid thing you ever trusted. You were simply built not to notice it, and the same is true of every person you have ever known. The warmth of a hand you have held, the weight of someone leaning against you, the solidity of a face you love, all of it is the same arrangement. Marbles in empty stadiums, force fields across gaps of nothing. We are clouds of charge that have learned to hold a shape, drifting close to one another, never quite touching, and calling the not quite touching by the name of contact. There is something almost unbearably gentle in that, once the fear passes. We are mostly nothing, reaching toward other mostly nothing, and somehow, out of all that emptiness, we manage to feel held. Open your eyes. The hand is still there, still warm, still yours. But I want you to feel the thing that has shifted, because this is the second trapdoor, and it is the one that makes all of this personal. The emptiness we found out among the cosmic voids, the overwhelming nothing that makes up most of the universe, is not somewhere far away. It is not a fact about distant space that you can hold at arm's length. The very same emptiness, the same ratio of a tiny speck of substance lost in an overwhelming hollow, is the structure of your own body. You are a faint disturbance in an enormous amount of nothing. So is the chair you are sitting in. So is the device you are listening to me on. So is every person you have ever loved, every hand you have ever held. We are all of us almost entirely empty space, holding ourselves together with a force, drifting through a universe that is also almost entirely empty space. The vastness you were taught to fear out there was never only out there. It was always also in here, all the way down, the most intimate fact about what you are. And I told you we would not stop at comfort. So let me ask the question that opens the next trapdoor. We have looked outward at the emptiness of the voids, and we have looked inward at the emptiness of the atom. How far apart are those two views, really? How many steps is it from the smallest thing to the largest? The answer is its own kind of vertigo, and it is where we go next. Part 4. You live at the center of a ladder. We have now stood at two opposite ends of things. We looked outward at the voids, the bubbles of near nothing hundreds of millions of light years wide. We looked inward at the atom, the hollow stadium with its single marble of a nucleus. And a natural question arises, one that most people never think to ask, because the two views feel like they belong to completely separate worlds. How far apart are they, really? If you started at the very smallest meaningful size and climbed all the way up to the very largest, how many steps would the climb take? To answer that, physics gives us two endpoints. At the bottom, there is a length called the Planck length. It is the scale below which our ordinary ideas of distance and space simply stop making sense, where the smooth fabric of space is thought to dissolve into something we do not yet understand. The Planck length is about 1.6 times 10 to the minus 35th of a meter. I am not going to pretend you can picture that number, because you cannot, and neither can I. It is a decimal point, followed by 34 zeros, and then a 16 in fractions of a meter. It is smaller than a proton, by as much as a proton is smaller than a city. It is the floor of size itself. At the top, there is the diameter of the observable universe, the largest distance that means anything to us, about 10 to the 27th meters across. And now, we can ask our question precisely. How many factors of 10 separate the smallest length from the largest? How many times would you have to multiply by 10, starting at the Planck length, to arrive at the width of the observable universe? The answer is around 60 factors of 10, 60 orders of magnitude from the bottom of reality to the top. We have spent a lot of tonight looking up the ladder, so let me take you a few rungs down it, just to feel how the smallness opens beneath you, exactly as the largeness opens above. Start at the marble, the nucleus we visited inside the atom. It is not the bottom. The nucleus is itself made of smaller things, protons and neutrons, packed together. And those are not the bottom either, because each proton is built from still smaller particles called quarks, bound together by forces. And the quarks, as far as we can tell, have no measurable size at all. They appear to be true points, with structure so small we cannot find any, and even there we are nowhere near the floor. Below the size of a quark, there is an enormous stretch of scale where nothing is yet known, an emptiness of understanding as much as an emptiness of space, and only far, far below, around the Planck length, do our concepts of distance themselves give out. The drop from the atom down to the Planck length is itself an enormous fall, as many factors of 10 as separate a human being from the largest galaxies. The smallness is not a short trip to a hard floor. It is its own immense descent, with its own gaps and its own mysteries, and most of it is as unknown to us as the regions beyond the cosmic horizon. Here is the part that should turn you slowly around where you sit. Where on that ladder of 60 steps do you stand? You, a human being, roughly 1 meter or so in scale. And the answer is that you are almost exactly in the middle, not near the bottom, cowering at the foot of an enormous cosmos, not lost down among the small things. You are suspended near the very center of the entire range of sizes that exist, with about 30 factors of 10 stretching up above you toward the cosmic horizon, and about 30 factors of 10 stretching down below you toward the Planck length. You are not small. You are mid-scale, and that is somehow far stranger than being small. Think about what it means to sit at the middle of that ladder. It means there is an immense range of bigness above you that you cannot truly imagine, the galaxies and the clusters and the cosmic web and the observable whole. And it means there is an equally immense range of smallness below you that you also cannot truly imagine, the molecules and the atoms and the particles and the structures below them, down and down to the plank floor. You are perched at the balance point between two infinities of scale, and your senses, your intuition, the entire apparatus of your mind can honestly grasp only the narrow band right around your own size. Everything else, up and down, is something you can calculate but never feel. There is a way to make the symmetry of it land. Imagine a single dot, the kind you might make with a fine pen, about 1/10 of a millimeter across, roughly the width of a human hair. That dot is near the smallest thing your unaided eye can comfortably see. Now imagine magnifying that dot until it is as large as the entire observable universe, 93 billion light-years across. An enormous magnification, almost beyond conceiving. Here is the strange part. In that magnified picture, where the dot has become the whole universe, the Planck length would be about the size of that same little dot, the hair's width, as it was before you magnified anything at all. The smallest step in reality stands in the same relationship to a speck you can barely see as that speck stands to the entire cosmos. The bottom and the top mirror each other perfectly across the middle, and you live in the middle. Part of why this is so hard to hold in the mind is that human intuition does not handle factors of 10 honestly. We think in addition, not in multiplication. If I ask you to picture the difference between a thing 1 meter long and a thing 2 meters long, you do it instantly and accurately. But each step on this ladder is not adding a meter. It is multiplying by 10, again and again. The step from 1 meter to 10 meters, and then from 10 meters to 100, and then to 1,000, feels to your mind like 3 even strides, when in fact each one dwarfs the last completely. By the time you have taken 30 such strides upward, you have left the scale of a human being and arrived at the scale of the entire observable universe. And by the time you have taken 30 downward, you have arrived at the floor of space itself. Your mind quietly insists these are gentle, regular steps. They are not. Each one is a 10-fold leap, and the ladder has 60 of them, and the gap between the top and bottom is so enormous that no active imagination can span it. You can only ever climb it the way we just did, one labelled rung at a time, trusting the arithmetic to carry you where the senses cannot. There is something almost suspicious about where we land in all of this, and it is worth saying plainly. Why should a thinking creature happen to sit near the exact middle of the ladder of scale? It turns out this is not entirely an accident. To be a living thing that can think, you need to be built of enormous numbers of atoms arranged into staggeringly complex structures, which rules out being too small. But you also need to be small enough that the forces holding you together, chemistry and electromagnetism, can dominate over the crushing pull of gravity, which rules out being too large. Life, complex life, can only exist in a relatively narrow band of scales, and that band sits, by the logic of physics itself, somewhere in the broad middle, between the particles and the planets. We are mid-scale, not by coincidence, but by necessity. The only kind of observer who could ever exist to be astonished by the ladder is one perched, as we are, at the balance point of it. The view from the middle is the only view there is. This is the third trapdoor, and it is a quieter one than the others, but in some ways it is the most disorienting, because the previous shocks could at least be placed somewhere. The emptiness of the voids was out there. The emptiness of the atom was in here. But this one is about your position in the order of things, and it dissolves the very idea that you are small. You are not the tiny thing at the bottom of a great height. You are the creature in the middle of a ladder, looking up at 30 rungs you cannot climb and down at 30 rungs you cannot descend, able to truly stand on only the 1 or 2 rungs nearest your own feet. The scale of the universe is not just enormous above you, it is bottomless in both directions, and you are stranded at the still point between them. And now that we know how the ladder is built, I want to take you back outward, up the rungs and show you what the emptiness looks like at the scale just above the everyday. Because we have talked about the emptiness inside the atom and the emptiness of the great voids, but we skipped over something in between, something closer to home, where the same nothing shows itself in a way you can almost picture. Let me show you what it really means that the nearest star is far away. Part 5. The distances are emptiness, not crowding. When you hear that a star is many light years away, your mind does a sensible thing and pictures a crowded room with the furniture spaced out. You imagine that the stars are like people at a party, standing a polite distance apart, and that the distance between them is large but ordinary, the kind of gap you could close if you simply walked far enough. That picture is wrong, and the way it is wrong is the same emptiness we have been circling all along, now at the scale of stars. Let me build you a model you can actually hold in your mind, because the real numbers are useless until you shrink them. Take the Sun, our own star, an object well over 1 million kilometers across, and shrink it down until it is the size of a single marble, the kind a child might keep in a pocket. On that scale, how big is the Earth, and how far away? The Earth becomes a grain of sand, barely visible, and it sits about 1 meter away from the marble. The entire orbit of our planet, the whole circle of our year, fits in a little ring about 1 meter wide around a marble. That alone tells you something, because already most of that meter is empty. But hold the model, because it is about to break your sense of distance entirely. On that same scale, where the Sun is a marble you could hold between 2 fingers, where is the nearest other star? Where is Proxima Centauri, our closest stellar neighbor, the very next marble in the cosmos? It is roughly 27,000 kilometers away. 27,000 kilometers. That is most of the way around the entire planet Earth. Picture it as plainly as you can. You are holding a marble. The nearest other marble is on the far side of the world, a journey of tens of thousands of kilometers, and in the entire enormous space between those 2 marbles, there is essentially nothing at all. No matter, no light, a few stray atoms drifting in the dark, and otherwise, emptiness on a scale that makes the word lose meaning. Even within our own solar system, the emptiness is the dominant feature. If you shrink the Earth down to the size of a marble, then the orbit of Neptune, the outermost major planet, needs an area about 7 miles across to contain it. Picture a marble in the middle of a town, and the edge of the planetary system reaching out to the far suburbs, and in all that space, a few scattered specks. The planets are not crowded. They are lonely beyond imagining, separated by gulfs of nothing, and they are practically touching compared to the distance to the next star. Even light feels the size of it. A beam of light, which could circle the entire Earth more than 7 times in a single second, needs about 8 minutes to travel from the Sun to us, and more than 5 hours to reach the outer planets, and well over a day to cross from one edge of the Sun's planetary realm to the other. The fastest thing in the universe takes hours to cross our small local neighborhood, and then, having left it, would need over 4 years of that same relentless speed just to reach the very nearest star. Hold those 2 facts side by side. Hours to cross our entire solar system. Years to reach the next marble. The gap between the stars is not a little larger than the gap between the planets. It is thousands of times larger, an emptiness so far beyond the emptiness we already called enormous, that the solar system, by comparison, is a single crowded point. Now, a fair question rises up at about this point, and I want to answer it honestly rather than wave it away, because it is asked sincerely far more often than people admit. How do we actually know these distances? If no one has ever travelled to another star, if the numbers are so enormous as to be unreal, how can anyone be sure they are not simply made up or wildly wrong? There are people who suspect the whole scale is an exaggeration, that the cosmos is far smaller and cozier than the textbooks claim, and that the enormous distances are some kind of error or invention. It is a reasonable suspicion to feel. It is also wrong, and the reason it is wrong is worth understanding because it rests on something beautifully simple. The nearest distances are measured by a method you use yourself every waking second without thinking. Hold a finger up at arm's length and look at it with one eye, then the other, and watch it jump against the background. That jump, that shift in apparent position when you look from two different vantage points, is parallax, and the size of the jump tells you the distance. Your two eyes do this to judge how far away things are. Astronomers do exactly the same thing with the stars, except their two vantage points are the Earth's position on opposite sides of its orbit around the Sun, hundreds of millions of kilometers apart. They measure the tiny shift in a nearby star's position against the distant background across half a year, and from that shift, by plane geometry, the same geometry a surveyor uses, they calculate the distance. It was first done successfully in the 1830s, and today a single spacecraft has used this method to map the precise distances to over 1 billion stars. The far distances are then built up from the near ones, rung by rung, each method calibrated against the one below it by entirely separate physical principles that would have to all be wrong in exactly the same way to produce a false answer. The scale is not a guess and not an invention. It is measured, cross-checked, and public, sitting in plain sight in any library. It is simply too large for the mind to feel, and being unable to feel a thing is very different from having reason to doubt it. I want you to notice that this is the same fact we have already met twice, wearing a different costume. The distance to Proxima Centauri is not large because the sky is crowded and you have to push past many things to reach it. The distance is large because the room is almost entirely empty and the stars are vanishingly rare specks within it. It is the same structure as the atom, where the nucleus is a marble and the electron is a kilometre away with nothing in between. It is the same structure as the cosmic web, where the galaxies are threads drawn through enormous bubbles of void. Inside the atom, between the planets, between the stars, between the galaxies, the picture repeats. A tiny speck of something, lost in an overwhelming amount of nothing. The marble in the empty stadium, again and again, at every scale you care to name. It helps to understand why the spaces are so empty, because the emptiness is not random. It is the natural result of how matter gathers under gravity. When you let a thin, nearly uniform spread of material collapse under its own attraction, it does not form a solid block. It forms islands. The matter clumps into dense knots, stars and planets, and in clumping, it leaves the regions in between swept nearly clean. The very act of forming a star carves out emptiness around it, because to build the star, gravity had to pull in material from a volume thousands of times larger than the star itself. So, every point of light you see is surrounded by the great emptied region that fed it. The stars are far apart precisely because they are made of what used to fill the space between them. The loneliness is the price of the light. And this same pattern, this clumping that carves out emptiness, is the reason for the rhyme we keep finding. Inside the atom, the electromagnetic forces pull the structure into a tiny, dense nucleus surrounded by mostly empty space. Among the planets, gravity pulls matter into compact worlds separated by enormous gaps. Among the stars, the same. Among the galaxies, the same. At every scale, the rule is the same rule. Matter gathers itself into rare, dense points, and in gathering, it empties out the surroundings. The marble in the empty stadium is not a coincidence repeated by chance at 4 different scales. It is the single signature of how attraction shapes a universe, written again and again from the atom to the cosmic web. Once you have seen it once, you cannot stop seeing it. The whole of creation is built on the same lonely pattern of a little something adrift in a great deal of nothing. I will not linger here as long as the subject deserves, because the loneliness of that single distance to the nearest star is almost a whole story in itself, and the emptiness of interstellar space could fill an entire night on its own. But for tonight it is a stepping stone, a rung on the ladder between the hollow of your own atoms and the hollow of the cosmic voids. It is the same emptiness at near human scale, the version you can almost picture by holding a marble and imagining another one on the far side of the world. Hold that image, because we are about to do something with all of these scales at once. We are going to put them in motion. We are going to take the whole ladder from your own room out to the edge of everything and back down into a single atom and travel it in one continuous fall. Part 6. The long fall outward and back. Settle back and let us leave the ground together. We begin in the room where you are right now. The walls fall away beneath us as we rise, and the building shrinks to a roof, then a block, then a sprawl of streets laced with light. We are over a city now, and it is dwindling, becoming a bright smear on a curving dark land. The curve sharpens. The horizon bends into a circle, and all at once the earth is a sphere hanging in black space, blue and white, and turning slowly, the whole world that has ever held a human being reduced to a single marble of cloud and ocean beneath us. We keep rising. The moon drifts past, a pale stone. The earth shrinks to a dot, then to a point of light no different from a star, and the sun blazes off to one side. Now the orbits of the planets open around us, enormous rings of empty space, with a tiny world riding each one, and we are climbing so fast that the entire solar system, every planet, every comet, the whole region that took spacecraft decades to cross, collapses into a single bright point. The sun is just a star again, one among many, and the many are everywhere now. We are among the stars of our own neighborhood, and they are so far apart that even at this speed they drift by slowly, marbles separated by tens of thousands of kilometers in our earlier model, each one alone in the dark. We rise faster. The stars gather into a great wheel of light below us, a spiral turning in the blackness, hundreds of billions of suns bound together. This is the Milky Way, our galaxy, the island we live on, and it too is shrinking now, becoming a glowing coin, then a faint smudge, and as it shrinks, others appear, galaxies everywhere, near and far, some in pairs, some in great swarms. We are rising through the cosmic web now, and we can finally see its shape. The galaxies are not scattered evenly. They are strung along luminous threads, and the threads wrap around enormous dark bubbles, the voids, each one hundreds of millions of light years of near-perfect nothing. The whole structure stretches out below and around us, like foam, like a sponge, like a web of light, enclosing oceans of darkness, and the darkness is most of it. Slow down here, at the scale of the cosmic web, because this is a view almost no one ever pauses inside, and it is one of the strangest sights in all of nature. From here, the galaxies have stopped being the point. Each one, 100 billion stars, the home of who knows how many worlds, has dwindled to a single grain in a much larger pattern, and the pattern is what holds the eye. The grains line up along glowing filaments, and the filaments stretch for hundreds of millions of light years, and where several filaments cross, the galaxies pile up into bright, dense knots. And wrapped between all of it are the voids, the enormous round shadows, each one a near-perfect, nothing wide enough to swallow our entire local neighborhood of galaxies many times over. The whole arrangement looks, depending on the moment, like foam, like a sponge cut open, like the fine branching threads in a slice of living tissue. It is the largest structure that exists, the actual shape of all the matter in the universe, and its dominant feature, by far, is the dark. The bright threads are a lacework drawn around an overwhelming volume of empty space. What stops the breath, if you let it, is remembering what each of those grains contains. Every faint point strung along those threads is a galaxy, and somewhere in one of them, impossibly far below us now, lost among 100 billion others, is a single ordinary star with a small blue world circling it, and on that world, a person sitting in a room, listening to a voice describe the very view they are part of. That is where we came from, moments ago in this fall. From here, it cannot even be found. The home of everything you have ever known is not visible at this scale. It is somewhere in the mist, indistinguishable, one lit grain among uncountable lit grains strung on threads around the dark. We rise until even the great threads grow faint, until the cosmic web itself becomes a fine, glittering mist, and then we stop. We have come as far out as anything can be seen, to the scale of the observable universe entire, and from here all of it, every galaxy, every thread, every void, every star and world and living thing that has ever existed within our sight, is gathered into one faint sphere of light, hanging in a darkness whose size we do not know. Hold here a moment, at the top of the ladder, and feel how far we have come from the room where we started. And now we fall. We fall back down, through the mist of galaxies, through the threads, back toward one particular smudge of light, back into the spiral of the Milky Way, down among the lonely stars, toward one ordinary marble of a sun, onto one grain of sand of a world, down through the clouds, into the city, into the room, and we do not stop. We fall toward your own hand where it rests, into the skin, into a single cell, into a molecule, into one atom, and the atom opens around us, into that silent hollow stadium we visited before, with its single marble of a nucleus far below and nothing in all the space between. We have fallen from the top of the ladder to very near the bottom, from the observable universe to the inside of a single one of your atoms, and the strangest thing of all is what we found at both ends. We found the same thing. We found emptiness, immense and patient and almost total, with a thin scattering of something precious drawn through it. The top of the scale and the bottom of the scale rhyme. And you, the one who took this fall, live in the narrow band of middle where the rhyme can be noticed at all. Notice what the round trip did, because it is the reason we took it. Going up, the journey emptied you out, made you smaller and smaller against an ever larger backdrop, until your whole world was a lost grain in the cosmic web. Coming back down, the same journey did the opposite, plunging past the world and the body into the hollow of a single atom, until the largest emptiness and the smallest emptiness stood revealed as the same emptiness. And you, the traveller, were the only thing that stayed the same size through all of it, the fixed point around which the scales unfolded in both directions. That is the secret the fall was meant to teach. You are not at the bottom of the universe, crushed under its weight. You are at the pivot of it, the one scale from which the climb up and the climb down look like mirror images of each other. The journey out and the journey in are the same journey, and you are standing exactly where they meet. Come to rest now, back in your room, back in your body, back at human scale. Breathe. We have travelled the whole ladder in a single fall, and I hope you felt, even faintly, the thing that numbers cannot give you, the bodily sense of how the scales nest inside one another, the small inside, the large inside the small. But there is a layer of this we have not touched yet, and it is the one that turns everything we have seen sideways. Because so far we have talked about the universe as if it were a place you could see all at once, a structure laid out in space for us to fall through. It is not. You have never seen the universe as it is. You have never even seen the night sky as it is. And once you understand why, the The scale will stop being only a fact about distance, and it will become a fact about time. Part 7. You have never seen now. Here is a fact so simple that it is taught to children, and so strange in its consequences that most adults never follow it to the end. Light travels at a finite speed. Fast beyond anything in ordinary experience. Yes, about 300,000 kilometers every second, but finite. It does not arrive instantly. It takes time to cross any distance. And that single, gentle fact means that every time you look at anything at all, you are not seeing it as it is. You are seeing it as it was, by exactly the length of time the light needed to reach you. Start close to home with the sun. When you feel sunlight on your face, that light left the surface of the sun about 8 minutes ago. You are not seeing the sun as it is right now. You are seeing the sun of 8 minutes in the past. If the sun was somehow to vanish this instant, you would have no way of knowing for a full 8 minutes. You would go on seeing it shining in a sky where it no longer existed, feeling the warmth of a star that was already gone. Everything you know about the sun is always a report from the past. Now step outward. The nearest star beyond the sun, Proxima Centauri, that marble on the far side of the world in our model, is about 4 light years away. So when you find it in the sky, you are seeing light that left it more than 4 years ago. You are looking at a 4-year-old photograph and calling it the present. Step further. The Andromeda galaxy is the most distant thing you can see with your unaided eye, a faint smudge on a dark night. Its light has been traveling toward you for about 2.5 million years. When you look at Andromeda, the light entering your eye left that galaxy around the time the very first members of our own genus, the first creatures we would recognize as something like human, were learning to shape stone tools on the plains of Africa. You are seeing Andromeda as it was before your species existed. Whatever Andromeda looks like now, today, in what you would call the present moment, you will never see it. That light has not been made yet. It will not arrive for 2.5 million more years, long after everyone alive tonight is gone, and it only deepens as you look further out. The most distant galaxies we can detect sent their light toward us more than 13 billion years ago, when the universe itself was young. Many of those galaxies, in the time their light has been traveling, have grown old, merged with others, transformed beyond recognition, or burned out entirely. The objects we see in our deepest images are, in a sense, ghosts. We are looking at what they were in the infancy of the cosmos. What they are now, we cannot see and may never see. The present-day universe, the one that exists at this exact moment, across all those enormous distances, is completely invisible to us. We have access only to its past, layered and arriving late. There are stars in our own sky tonight that may not actually be there anymore. Consider a star like Betelgeuse, the bright reddish point on the shoulder of the constellation we call Orion. It is somewhere around 600 light-years away, which means the light you see from it tonight left it about 600 years ago, around the time when, here on Earth, the first printing presses were still a generation away. Betelgeuse is old and unstable, the kind of star expected to end its life in an enormous explosion. It is entirely possible that Betelgeuse has already exploded, that it died 100 or 300 years ago, and that the light of its death is right now crossing the gulf toward us, still centuries from arrival. We would have no way to know. We would go on seeing the calm orange star, night after night, for as long as it takes the old light to run out, watching a star that may no longer exist. When people say the night sky is full of the past, this is what they mean in its sharpest form. Some of those lights may be portraits of the dead, hanging in our sky, their subjects long gone, the news of it still in the mail. This same delay sets a hard and humbling limit on everything we could ever know or do across cosmic distances. There is no way to receive news of the present from far away, because there is no signal faster than light to carry it. If something of enormous importance happened in the Andromeda galaxy today, some catastrophe or wonder, no one on Earth could learn of it for 2.5 million years. And anything we might wish to say in return would take another 2.5 million years to arrive, by which time the senders and the listeners alike would be unrecognizable or gone. The size of the universe does not merely separate things in space. It severs them in time, cutting every distant place off from every other distant place, so that no two widely separated points can ever share a moment, ever hold a conversation, ever know each other as they are. Each is locked inside its own slowly expanding bubble of old news. The largeness becomes a kind of permanent solitude built into the structure of the cosmos itself. So consider what the night sky actually is. You probably think of it as a picture of the universe, a single snapshot of how things are. It is nothing of the kind. The night sky is a collage of countless different pasts, all arriving at your eye at once, but each one from a different moment in history. The nearest stars are showing you a few years ago. Stars across our galaxy are showing you hundreds or thousands of years ago. Andromeda is showing you the dawn of humanity. The faintest smudges are showing you the early universe. There is not one single moment represented in that sky. There is no now up there to see. The sky is not a window onto the present. It is a stack of photographs of the dead and the changed and the long departed, pasted together into the illusion of a single image. This is the fourth trapdoor, and it adds a dimension the headline number never mentioned. We have been speaking about scale as if it were only about distance, about how far things are and how empty the space between them is. But the distances are so enormous that they turn into time. The universe is so large that the simple act of seeing it becomes a form of looking backward. The scale is not only spatial, it is temporal. And it leads to a conclusion that I find quietly staggering. There is no possible vantage point anywhere in the universe from which any observer could ever see the whole cosmos in a single, shared present moment. The universe is too large for now to be a thing you can witness. Across cosmic distances, the present is not hidden by some obstacle we might one day remove. It is sealed away by the structure of reality itself, by the marriage of finite light and enormous space. Let me give that its full weight in the next part, because it is one thing to understand it as a fact, and another to stand under the sky and feel it, and I want you to feel it. Part 8. A photograph of something already gone. Go outside, in your mind, on a clear and moonless night, far from the lights of any city. Let your eyes adjust until the faint stars come out, and the band of the Milky Way arches overhead like spilled light. It looks, more than anything, like a single moment. The whole sky seems to hang there all at once, present, complete, now. But you know better now, so let it come apart in time. Find a bright nearby star, and understand that you are seeing it as it was a handful of years ago. Let your gaze drift to the band of the Milky Way, and know that those stars are showing you light from hundreds, from thousands of years in the past, light that left them while empires you have read about still stood. Find the faint smudge of Andromeda low on the horizon, and feel the 2.5 million years its light has crossed to reach you, the whole span of human becoming compressed into that single dim patch. And now try, really try, to find one point of light in that entire sky that is showing you this moment, tonight, now. You cannot. There is not one. Every light you see is old. Every light is a report from a moment that has already passed. You are standing under a sky that is entirely past, searching for a present that is not there and never will be. And the further you look, the older the light, so that the faintest things are the oldest, and at the very edge of seeing, the light is almost as old as the universe itself. The sky is layered like rings in a tree, the recent nearby and the ancient far away, all of it pressed flat onto the same dark dome above your head, all of it reaching your eye in the same instant, though it left its sources across billions of separate years. You are not looking at a place. You are looking down a well of time, and the bottom of the well is the beginning of everything. Come back inside. Sit with what that means, because it is the second of the realizations I most want you to carry out of tonight. You have never seen the universe. Not once. Not ever. You have only ever seen its past, arriving late at the back of your eye. Every star, every galaxy, every face in the sky is a photograph of something that has already changed, or moved, or died. And this is not a flaw in your eyes, not a weakness of your telescopes, not something a better instrument could ever fix. It is the size of the universe expressing itself as time. The cosmos is so enormous that it cannot show you its present. It can only mail you its past, in light, and the further away a thing is, the older the letter when it finally arrives. It is worth saying that this is not only a loss. There is a gift hidden inside the delay, and astronomers live on it every day. Because looking far away is the same as looking far back in time, the night sky is not only a graveyard, it is also the only record we have of the history of the universe, written in light and delivered slowly enough that we can still read it. When we point our largest telescopes at the faintest, most distant smudges, we are not seeing them as they are. We are seeing them as they were, billions of years ago, when the universe was young, and that is precisely how we have learned the story of how galaxies formed and changed. The slowness of light, which steals the present from us, hands us the past in exchange. Every distance is also a date. To look out is to look back, and so the sky becomes a kind of time machine, the only one we will ever have, showing us not what is, but everything that was, layer upon layer, all the way back toward the beginning. There is a particular grief in this, if you let yourself feel it, but there is also something I find oddly tender. Think of the people who have looked up across history. Every human being who has ever lived looked up at that same sky of ghosts and saw it as the present, as the now, as the way things are. The light from Andromeda that reached the eyes of the first toolmakers is not the same light that reaches you tonight, but it came from the same galaxy, telling the same kind of old story. We are all, every generation, reading letters that were sent before we were born, from senders who have long since become something else. The sky is a correspondence with the dead, and we have been answering it with wonder for as long as there have been eyes to look up. I find it steadies me, rather than frightening me, to remember that this has always been true, and that human beings have always lived gracefully inside it without knowing. Every astronomer who ever charted a star, every sailor who ever steered by one, every person who ever made a wish on a point of light was looking at the past and calling it the present, and it took nothing from the beauty of the looking. The light of a star does not become less lovely because it is old. If anything, it becomes more so, the way a letter from someone far away is precious precisely because of the distance it crossed and the time it took. We have been reading old light our whole history, mistaking it for now, and building our myths and our calendars and our sense of home around it. The discovery that it is old does not break that relationship. It only reveals how patient it always was, how the universe has been sending us mail across millions of years, and we have been faithfully receiving it, generation after generation, never once seeing the sender as they truly are at the moment of reading. So hold these two things together as we go on, because they are about to collide with something even larger. The universe is mostly empty, and we have seen that emptiness run from the cosmic voids down into your own atoms. And the universe is so large that you can never see it as it is, only as it was. Both of these are already more than the comfortable number ever admitted, and yet there is one more trapdoor beneath them both, the deepest one, the one that takes even the enormous number we started with, 2 trillion galaxies and reveals it as something close to nothing. Because here is the question we have not yet asked. Of everything we can see, how much can we ever actually reach? And is what we can see even most of what is there? The answers are worse than you think. They are the bottom of the fall. Part 9. Most of it you can never touch, and it isn't even most of it. Let us start with reaching, because it is the gentler half of this part, if either half can be called gentle. The space of the universe is not static. It is expanding, has been expanding since the beginning, and that expansion is not slowing down. It is accelerating. The distant galaxies are not merely far away. They are getting farther, faster, every second, carried apart by the swelling of space itself. And this has a consequence that took astronomers a long time to fully absorb, and that almost no one outside of cosmology has ever heard stated plainly. Most of the universe we can see is already, permanently, beyond our reach. Here is the number. Suppose we launched a ship today that could travel at the speed of light, the absolute cosmic speed limit, faster than anything can ever actually go. Suppose it set out to visit as many galaxies as possible, with all the time in the universe to do it. What fraction of the galaxies we can currently see could it ever reach? The answer is about 3%. Only 3% of the galaxies in the observable universe are still reachable, even in principle, even at the speed of light, even with infinite time. The other 97% are already gone. Everything beyond a certain distance, around 18 billion light-years, is receding so quickly, carried away by expanding space, that no signal we could ever send, no ship, no beam of light leaving Earth tonight will ever catch up to it. We can see those galaxies because their old light reached us long ago, but we can never touch them, never visit them, never send so much as a single photon that arrives. They are visible and unreachable at the same time, like faces on the far side of a window that is always silently widening. It is natural to object here, because it sounds like a contradiction. Nothing can move faster than light. So how can distant galaxies recede from us faster than light? Fast enough that our own light can never catch them? The answer is one of the most beautiful and counterintuitive ideas in physics, and it is worth getting right. Those distant galaxies are not moving through space faster than light. They are barely moving through their local space at all. What is happening is that the space between us and them is itself expanding, new distance appearing everywhere at once, all along the enormous gulf that separates us. Picture a loaf of raisin bread rising in an oven. The raisins are the galaxies, and the dough is space. No raisin is racing through the dough. But as the dough swells, every raisin grows farther from every other raisin, and the farther apart two raisins already are, the more dough lies between them to expand, and so the faster they separate. Beyond a certain distance, so much space lies between us and a given galaxy, and so much new space is appearing within it every second, that the gap grows faster than light can close it. The galaxy is sitting almost still. It is the space in between that is running away with it. This also means the story will only deepen with time, and there is a strange and lonely future built into it. Because the expansion is accelerating, the distant galaxies are slipping away ever faster, and their light is being stretched thinner and dimmer as it crosses the growing gulf. Far enough into the future, billions of years from now, every galaxy outside our own small bound group will have receded beyond the point of visibility, their light stretched past detection, their images faded entirely from the sky. A thinking creature, living in that distant era, looking out with the finest instruments, would see only its own galaxy alone, in an apparently empty blackness, with no evidence that anything else had ever existed. It would conclude, reasonably and carefully and completely wrongly, that its galaxy was the whole universe, exactly as we ourselves believed only a century ago. We are living in a privileged window of cosmic history, one of the only eras in which the evidence of the wider universe still reaches us at all. The largeness is not only mostly unreachable, it is, very slowly, disappearing. And it grows worse in the most literal way, because the window is widening as we speak. The expansion is accelerating, so with every second that passes, more galaxies cross that line and slip permanently out of reach. Right now, as you listen, the reachable universe is shrinking. Galaxies that a distant civilization might have reached 1 billion years ago are now beyond saving. Some galaxy, at this very moment, is crossing the threshold into the unreachable, and once it crosses, it is gone for all time, no matter what anyone does. The portion of the cosmos we could ever hope to touch is not just small, it is leaking away, second by second, and it will never stop. So already, the 2 trillion galaxies have shrunk in meaning. They are not a treasury we might one day explore. They are, almost entirely, a view through glass, 97% of them forever untouchable. But I told you this was the deepest trapdoor, and we have only opened the first half of it, because there is a far larger blow waiting, and it is this. The observable universe is not the universe. That 93 billion light-years, the number we started with, the number on all the posters, is not the size of everything. It is only the size of the part, whose light has had time to reach us in the 13.8 billion years since the beginning. It is a bubble centered on us, defined entirely by our own limited vantage and the finite age of the cosmos. Beyond its edge, the universe simply continues. And we have good reason to believe it continues a very long way. How far? Using measurements of the cosmic microwave background and large surveys of galaxies, cosmologists have estimated a conservative floor for the size of the whole universe. Not the observable part, the whole thing. And that floor is enormous. The entire universe is at least 250 times larger by volume than the part we can see. At least. That is the cautious minimum, the smallest it could reasonably be, and it already means that everything we have ever observed, every galaxy in every image ever taken, is a tiny sample, a single scoop from an ocean at least 250 times deeper than the scoop. And that is only the floor. The true size could be vastly greater. And if the universe is flat, which our best measurements strongly suggest it is, flat to within a tiny margin of error, then the most natural conclusion is that the universe is not just larger than what we see. It is infinite, spatially endless, without edge, without boundary, going on forever, in every direction. Stop and let that settle against everything that came before. We started tonight with 2 trillion galaxies, and that number broke your sense of scale all on its own. Then we learned that the galaxies are scattered through overwhelming emptiness. Then that the same emptiness is inside your own body. Then that you sit at the middle of a ladder of sizes you cannot picture in either direction. Then that you have never even seen the universe as it is, only its layered past. And now, at the bottom, we learn that the 2 trillion galaxies, the entire observable universe, the largest thing you were ever asked to imagine, is itself only a tiny bubble, at least 250 times too small to be the whole, and quite possibly an infinitesimal speck in something with no size at all. The word everything, applied to all that we can see, is not generous. It is a wild overstatement, wrong by a factor we cannot even name and may never be able to name. Let me try to make that factor of at least 250 feel like something, because as a bare number, it slips away. Imagine standing on a beach at night with a single small flashlight and switching it on. The little cone of light it throws onto the sand, the patch you can actually see, is your observable universe. Everything within that patch you can study in detail. And the beach, the whole dark beach, stretching away on all sides, far beyond the reach of your little beam, is the rest of the universe. Now, the honest scientific statement is not that the beach is a bit bigger than your patch of light. It is that the beach is, at the very least, hundreds of times larger than the patch, and that we have no measurement that finds its edge in any direction, and that for all we can tell, it may simply have no edge at all, running on into the dark without end. You are standing in your small circle of light, which feels like the whole world because it is everything you can see, and around you in every direction is an unmeasured expanse that dwarfs it and may never stop. That is our actual situation. The observable universe is the flashlight beam. The universe is the night. And notice that we cannot even step outside our beam to check. We are fixed at the center of our own observable bubble, not because we are special, but because every observer everywhere sees their own bubble centered on themselves, limited by how far light has had time to travel to them. A creature in one of those galaxies near our horizon has its own bubble, reaching as far past us in one direction as it falls short in the other, seeing regions we will never see and missing regions we take for granted. There is no observer anywhere with a view of the whole. Each of us, everywhere in the cosmos, is sealed inside a private sphere of old light, calling it everything, and each of us is wrong in the same way, by the same unknowable factor. This is the third realization I want to hand you, and it is the one that finally empties the word. Everything was never a word about the universe's size. It was always a word about your limits. When you say everything, you mean everything I can see, everything whose light has reached me, everything inside my own small bubble. And that bubble, enormous as it is, mostly unreachable as it is, turns out to be a rounding error inside a hole that dwarfs it beyond measure. The biggest number you know is not big. Held up against what is actually there, it rounds down to almost nothing. And here, at the very bottom, I want to open one last door, gently, and label it clearly as speculation rather than established fact, because the channel that we are has always preferred honest uncertainty to false confidence. We have spent the whole night treating scale, size, distance as the most basic and solid feature of reality, the stage on which everything else happens. But some of the most serious work at the frontier of physics suggests that scale itself may not be fundamental at all. There is a remarkable idea called the holographic principle, which arose from the study of black holes, and it proposes that the maximum amount of information that can be packed into any region of space depends not on its volume but on its surface area, on the size of the boundary around it, rather than the room inside. Taken to its conclusion, this hints that the three-dimensional expanse we experience, all that precious depth and distance, might be encoded on a lower dimensional surface, the way a flat sheet can store a three-dimensional hologram. And other approaches to combining gravity with quantum mechanics suggest that smooth space, and therefore size and distance themselves, are not bedrock, but emerge from something deeper that is neither large nor small. I raise this not to claim it is true, because we do not know that it is, but to show you that even the floor we have been standing on tonight, the very idea of scale, may someday open into yet another room. We may find, in the end, that bigness and smallness are not the deepest truths about the universe, but appearances thrown up by something stranger underneath, the way the solidity of your hand turned out to be a surface appearance of force and emptiness. The honest position, at the edge of what is known, is that we have measured an enormous universe whose ultimate size we cannot fix, and whose very largeness may not be fundamental. And we have learned to hold all of that without needing it to resolve. The not knowing is not a failure. It is the true shape of the frontier. We have reached the bottom of the fall. There are no more trapdoors beneath this one, not because the universe runs out, but because we run out, because past this point there is only the part we cannot see and cannot measure and can only reason our way toward. So let me take you there, to the very edge of what can be known, and let you stand at it and look out. Because the edge is not what you imagine either. Part 10. The edge that is not an edge. Come with me one last time, out past the galaxies, out to the very limit of the observable universe, to the boundary of the bubble whose light has had time to reach us. In your imagination, place yourself there, at the edge, at the farthest distance anyone on Earth could ever see. You might expect a wall, a great curtain, a boundary, some visible end of things, a place where the universe stops and something else begins. So look outward, past the edge, into what lies beyond the limit of our sight. And what you find there is the strangest thing of all. There is no wall, there is no edge. There is only more galaxies, more threads of the cosmic web, more enormous dark voids, running on past the boundary exactly as they ran up to it, in every direction, with no sign anywhere of stopping. The edge of the observable universe is not the edge of the universe. It is only the edge of how far the light has gotten. Step past it, and you are simply in more universe, no different from the universe behind you, stretching on and on, perhaps without any end at all. Let yourself follow that thought to its end, because if the universe truly has no edge, if it really does go on forever, then something almost unthinkable follows from it. In an infinite space filled, on the largest scale, with roughly the same kind of matter everywhere, every possible arrangement of particles that can happen, must happen, and not only once, but an infinite number of times. There are only so many ways to arrange the atoms in a region the size of, say, a human being in a room. A finite number of ways, enormous beyond description, but finite. And in an infinite universe, every one of those finite arrangements gets played out somewhere, over and over, without end. Which means that somewhere out past the edge of everything we can see, far beyond the horizon, at a distance so large that writing it down would require a number stacked on top of another number, there is a region identical to this one. There is another small blue world, another room, another person in the shape of you, hearing these same words in this same moment. Not a metaphor. A consequence of the arithmetic, if the universe is infinite, the scale would be so large that it would run out of new things to do and begin, of necessity, to repeat you. I offer that not as something to believe with certainty, because we do not know that the universe is infinite, only that it may well be. I offer it as a way to feel the size of what lies past the edge. The part we cannot see is not a little more universe tucked beyond the horizon. It is potentially endless, potentially large enough to contain every possible version of every possible thing, including you, copied without limit across a darkness that never stops. And all of it, all of that unmeasured and maybe infinite expanse, sits outside the small, bright moat that is everything we have ever known. Now turn around, turn and look back the way we came, back at the entire observable universe, the whole bubble, every galaxy and star and thread and void that any human being has ever seen or photographed or named. Watch it from out here, from beyond its edge, and let it shrink. Let it pull back until the entire observable cosmos, all 93 billion light-years of it, all 2 trillion galaxies, the whole of everything you were ever asked to imagine, becomes a single faint sphere of light, one luminous mote, hanging in a darkness whose size no one knows. And understand that the darkness around that mote is not empty in the way the voids are empty. It is full of more universe, more than the mote contains, at least 250 times more, and maybe endlessly more. Everything you have ever known is that one small glow, and it is adrift in something without a measured shore. There is one more strange detail to notice about this edge, and it deepens the loneliness of the picture in a quiet way. The boundary of what we can see is not fixed in place, like the wall of a room. It recedes. As the universe expands, and the most distant light is stretched and dimmed, the practical edge of our knowledge slowly draws inward in some respects, and the unreachable region grows. The horizon is less like the edge of a table, and more like the horizon at sea, which moves with you, always the same distance off, never a place you can arrive at. You could travel toward it for 1 billion years and find that it has kept its distance the whole way, that the edge of the knowable has stayed exactly as far ahead as it was when you began. It is not a location in space at all. It is a property of your situation, a limit set by the speed of light and the age of the universe and the swelling of space, carried with you wherever you go. Every observer drags their own horizon behind their eyes, and no observer can ever reach it, and beyond it, always, is more. Hold there, at the limit of knowing, with the whole observable universe reduced to a spark in your field of view. This is as far as the fall goes, because this is as far as knowledge goes. Past this point there is no data, no image, no measurement, only the silence of the part we can never reach, and the strong suspicion that it goes on forever. And here, at the bottom of everything, with the spark of all we know floating in unmeasured dark, something unexpected happens. The fear, if you have been feeling fear, begins to change into something else, because you are about to realize that this enormous, empty, half-invisible, mostly unreachable, possibly endless thing is not separate from you. You came from inside it. You are made of it. And that changes everything about how it feels to be small. Let the image fade now, and let us come home, all the way home, back through the dark, back to the moat, back into one galaxy, one star, one world, one room, one body. Come back to your own hand. We have one last thing to understand, and it is the thing that turns all of this from a horror into something I can only call a homecoming. Part 11. The scale was never only out there. Let me bring back the phrase I asked you to keep. At the very start of tonight, I spoke about the peace you think you have made with the size of the universe. That comfortable peace, the one that comes from hearing the number, nodding, and filing it all under the word big. I told you I would take that peace away, and over the last while, trapdoor by trapdoor, I have. The universe is not big in the gentle way you believed. It is empty almost entirely. The emptiness runs down into your own atoms. You sit suspended at the middle of a ladder of sizes you cannot picture in either direction. You have never once seen the universe as it is, only its layered past. And the largest thing you were ever asked to imagine is a rounding error inside a hole that may have no end. The piece is gone. The word has fallen apart. Good, because now I can offer you the other piece, the one that does not come from looking away, and it begins with a single turn of perspective. Every frightening thing we have found tonight, we found in two directions at once. The emptiness was out among the voids, and it was also inside your hand. The ladder of scale climbed 30 rungs above you, and it dropped 30 rungs below you, and you were the middle. Again and again, the very large and the very small turned out to be the same story told at different magnifications, the same marble lost in the same empty stadium. And that symmetry is not a coincidence, and it is not a trick. It is the most important fact in this entire night, because it means the scale of the universe is not something happening to you from the outside. It is something you are made of. You are not a small, solid, separate thing staring up in terror at a large, empty, alien cosmos. You are the same emptiness, the same nested scale, the same patient structure, looking back at itself. There is a way of seeing this that the writer and astronomer Carl Sagan put better than almost anyone when he looked at a photograph of the Earth taken from the far edge of our own solar system, a single pale dot caught in a sunbeam, and pointed out that everyone who had ever lived, every king and every child, every triumph and every cruelty in all of human history had taken place on that one tiny point of light. We have gone much further out tonight than that photograph did, far enough that not just the Earth, but the entire galaxy, and then the entire observable universe, shrank to a mote. And yet the lesson sharpens rather than dissolves. The smaller our home appears against the true scale, the more precious and improbable it becomes that it exists at all, that on one rare gathered thread of matter, in one ordinary galaxy, on one small world, the emptiness managed to fold itself into something that could look back out and measure the very gulf it is lost in. Smallness, seen rightly, is not the same as insignificance. The dot is small. What is happening on the dot is not. Consider what you actually are, now that we have fallen all the way down and climbed all the way up. The atoms in your body, the marbles in their empty stadiums, were not made on Earth. They were forged inside stars, in the cores of suns that lived and died long before our own sun was born, and were scattered across the emptiness when those stars came apart, and gathered again by gravity into the world that became you. You are built from the ash of dead stars, assembled out of the thin matter, drawn through the cosmic web, made of the rare, precious threads rather than the overwhelming void. You are what the emptiness does on those rare occasions when it gathers enough of itself together to wake up and look around. The scale did not produce you in spite of itself. You are one of the things the scale produced. And here, at last, the other callback comes due, the one about light. We learned that everything you see in the sky is a photograph of something already gone, old light from senders that have long since changed or died. I want you to understand that this is true of you as well, in the most literal way. The atoms you are made of are older than the Earth, older than the Sun, photographs in matter of stars that died billions of years ago. You are not separate from the sky of ghosts. You are one of its letters, written long ago in the death of stars, and only now, briefly, reading itself. When you look up at that ancient light and feel the strangeness of seeing only the past, you are an old thing looking at old things, the dead light of distant stars, falling onto eyes built from the dust of nearer ones. It is not alienation, it is family. It is the universe, made of fossil light and patient emptiness, recognizing its own face. It is worth noticing that the fear you may have felt tonight, the small cold drop at each trapdoor, was never really about the universe. The universe does not threaten you. It is not coming for you. A void hundreds of millions of light years wide has no opinion of you at all. The fear was about the loss of a story, the comfortable story in which you were a solid being standing on solid ground in a manageable world of an understandable size. That story was always a kindness your mind told itself, and it is genuinely hard to watch it go. But notice what is actually left once it is gone. Nothing about your life has changed. The people you love are exactly as real as they were this morning. The warmth of this moment is exactly as warm. What has changed is only that you now see the true frame around it all. And the true frame, strange as it is, does not diminish the picture inside it. If anything, a small, warm gathering of meaning, set against an enormous and ancient and mostly empty cosmos, is more remarkable for the setting, not less. The size does not cheapen you. It is the dark background that lets the small light show. So this is the peace I can offer you in place of the one I took. It is not the peace of comfort, the peace of a word standing in for a feeling. It is the peace of belonging to something you finally see clearly. The universe is empty, and so are you, and that shared emptiness is not a wound, but a kinship. The universe is so large you can never see it whole or cross more than a sliver of it, and that is true, and you are still made of it, still a native of it, still one of the rare places where it has gathered itself into something that can wonder. You are mid-scale, balanced between the enormous and the tiny, and that is not a small or pitiful place to stand. It is the one place on the whole ladder from which both directions can be seen at all. You are the middle of the scale, looking up and looking down, the one point where the very large and the very small can meet and be noticed. Let me gather the whole descent one last time, gently, the way you might run your eyes over a path you have just walked. We began with a single comfortable number and the peace you had made with it. Then the first floor opened, and we found the universe is not full, but overwhelmingly empty, threads of light around enormous bubbles of nothing. The second floor opened, and the same emptiness turned out to be inside the atom, inside your own hand, the marble lost in the empty stadium. The third opened onto the ladder of scale, 60 steps from the smallest length to the largest, with you balanced near the middle, unable to picture either end. The fourth showed the distances are emptiness and not crowding, the nearest star a marble on the far side of the world. The fifth turned space into time and showed you have never once seen the universe as it is, only its old light arriving late, a sky full of the past. And the last floor opened onto the worst and largest fact of all, that almost everything you can see can never be reached, and that everything you can see is itself a flashlight beam on an endless dark beach. 6 floors, 6 trapdoors, every one of them open at once beneath you right now as you sit and breathe. And the thing I most want you to carry is that all 6 of those facts, every one that emptied and frightened and dwarfed you, turned at the very end into the same single truth, wearing different masks. The emptiness out there is the emptiness in here. The largeness above you is mirrored by the smallness below you. The old light in the sky is the same age as the atoms in your hand. You were never the small, separate thing trembling beneath an enormous alien cosmos. You were always a piece of the cosmos itself, made to its own pattern, at its own pivot of scale, briefly gathered into something that could look up and be astonished. The whole long fall was not away from you. It was a circle, and it led back to your own warm hand, resting where it has rested this whole time, holding more emptiness and more ancient starlight than you ever knew it did. We do not know if it ends. That is the honest truth I will leave you with, because I promise not to hand you false comfort. We have a firm floor for the size of the universe, and no ceiling at all. It may be finite and merely enormous beyond imagining, or it may be infinite, without edge or end, and we may never be able to tell from the inside, and we cannot truly picture it either way. Every image I gave you tonight, the marble in the stadium, the grain of sand, the dot magnified to the size of the cosmos, every one of them was an admission that the thing itself is too large and too small and too strange for a mind built at human scale to hold directly. We can do the arithmetic of 60 orders of magnitude. We cannot feel it. And the wonder you feel right now, that quiet vertigo at the edge of understanding, is the sound of your intuition reaching its limit and finding, past the limit, not emptiness, but more. That is why the scale of the universe is far worse than you think. Not because it is big, but because big was only the first and gentlest of its secrets. It is empty, and the emptiness is in your hands. It is bottomless in both directions, and you live at the still point between them. It is so large that you can only ever see its past, and the largest thing you can imagine is a speck in a hole that may never end. All of that is true, all at once, tonight, as you sit here. And the last secret, the one underneath all the others, is that none of it is happening to you from far away. It is what you are. You are a small, warm, gathered piece of an enormous, empty, ancient, possibly endless thing, briefly awake, looking up at the rest of itself, and calling the feeling by the only words you have. Stay with that feeling a little longer. It is the truest thing you will think about all day, and it will still be true tomorrow night when you step outside and look up and see the old light falling, and know now exactly what you are looking at and exactly what is looking back.